Afternoon. Welcome everyone to the third Starker Lecture of 2026. Both to all of you here today, as well as those of you joining us online. And let me say parenthetically, I'm really encouraged by the turnout here today. You know, we wondered over the months. We knew it was bounded on the left by 0 attendees, but we had no idea what the upper bound would be. And we're just so glad that you're here with us today. My name is Mark Swanson. I serve as the Starker Chair in Private and Family Forestry, and I also serve as the Interim Director of the OSU Research Forest. I'm privileged to call the College of Forestry and OSU home, and also privileged to be involved with this very special and thought-provoking lecture series. The Starker Lectures, founded in 1985, celebrate the legacy of Thurman James, or TJ Starker, and his son Bruce Starker. And they built Starker Forest, which has become an absolute pillar of the community and a very wonderful exemplar of a forest products company. And TJ went on to become a professor at what is now Oregon State University, and Bruce, his son, and other members of the family, including Bond, Bart, and Anna Mae Starker, have raised that local company to prominence in the forestry world. So we thank them for their continued support of these lectures and of the College of Forestry. And we have Bond here with us today. Thank you, Bond, for being here with us. Yeah, round of applause. Yeah, if you don't mind. And I'm really grateful for the wonderful people who have served on the Starker Lecture Committee, including its present members, Jessica Fontaine, the Director of Alumni Engagement and Events, Laurel Sherman with Forestry Extension, Dr. Annette Patton with Extension and the Department of Forest Engineering, Resources and Management, and Dr. Lech Mazinski of Wood Science and Engineering, Dr. Ron Reuter of Forest Ecosystems and Society, and Anna Starker-May of Starker Forest, who couldn't join us this afternoon, but Anna, thank you. And Julia Woodward of the Oregon Forest Resources Institute. Raise your hand if you're here in the room. I see Ron, I see Julie, and Laurel. Yeah, thanks to you and to the other members of the Starker Lecture Committee. That's a lot of work for a wonderful service to the community. And I'm very honored to serve alongside these fine people. Thanks also to the leadership of the College of Forestry, including Dean Dr. Tom DeLuca, who is here, and Associate Deans Drs. Holly Ober and Katie Kavanaugh. I see Holly and Tom. Thank you for being here this afternoon. This afternoon is a very special event, given that we are welcoming a very special team of people who have tremendous insight into the OSU Research Forest system. First, Mr. Stephen Fitzgerald, Director of the Oregon State University Research Forest from 2014 to 2023. Professor Fitzgerald's prior career was in research and extension in Eastern Oregon, and he's been with OSU since 1984. He originally hails from Massachusetts. Welcome, Fitz. Thank you for being here. Next up, we have Mrs. Jenna Baker, who is the Recreation Manager for the OSU Research Forest. Jenna comes from the great state of Colorado. She graduated with a degree in history from Willamette University and a master's degree in recreation planning from this institution. She's been part of the OSU Research Forest team since 2021. Jenna, welcome. Next up, we have Mr. Brent Klumph, Associate Director of Operations for the OSU Research Forest. Mr. Klumph is a graduate of Oregon State University and has been working on the Research Forest since 2004. He grew up in Tillamook, Oregon. Welcome, Brent. And today we also welcome Mr. Andrew Perini, who is the Fire and Silviculture Program Manager for the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. Mr. Perini will provide insight on tribal perspectives on forest management, restoration, and cultural values that inform contemporary forest management practices. And Andrew grew up in Oregon. He loves to hunt, hike, fish, backpack, camp, and spend time with family and friends. And we are very grateful that he is here. He also is a graduate of the College of Forestry in Forest Management and Fire Science back in 2010. Andrew, thank you for being here. As we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the indigenous people of this land to whom we owe so much in so many ways. Oregon State University in Corvallis is located within the traditional homelands of the Marys River or Ampanefu Band of Kalapuya. Following the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855, Kalapuya people were forcibly removed to reservations in Western Oregon. Today, living descendants of these people are part of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians. A warm welcome to those with tribal heritage here today. Welcome. And I'll kick us off just by introducing very briefly the Oregon State University Research Forest System. The flagship, of course, of the system is the 11,500-acre McDonald Dunn Research Forest, which was founded beginning in 1926. And it was Thurman James Starker who actually was critically involved in acquiring a number of the parcels that formed the nucleus of that research forest, with a lot of the financial funding coming from Mrs. Mary McDonald and other benefactors of the institution. Followed shortly by the Blodgett Tract, which is up in the northwestern part of the state, and that's 2,400 acres. And then we've added a number of other forests around the state ever since then, ranging from off in Northeast Oregon near Baker City or Elgin, Oregon, we have the Oberteufel, or informally the Obi Tract, and then all the way down to Southwest Oregon, where we have the Collins Demonstration Forest, which is down in the warmer, drier forests of the southwestern corner of the state, and a number of other tracts that are used for extension, research, teaching, and other values. And so it provides a lot of services to the people of Oregon, great place for extension work, scientific research, engagement with tribal communities, and many, many other values. And so, yeah, we have a lot of values that really govern our obligation and our mission and our vision at the OSU Research Forest. Research really is one of the premier values, and it was one of the chief objectives for which the system was set up historically. And of course, education. And that, of course, is undergraduate and graduate education centered on Oregon State, but it also involves extension audiences and kindergarten through 12th grade audiences and many other types of audience, formal and informal. Demonstration and extension are also important parts of the mission. So for demonstration, we provide a place where a number of alternative forest practices can be shown to the public and their relative benefits and merits discussed and taught. And of course, it's a self-funded system. We depend upon timber harvest revenue for the cost of running the system, and that allows us to engage also with the local forest products industry. And recreation, and we're going to hear a lot about recreation today. And of course, a provision of habitat for a wide variety of organisms, from those that require late seral habitats, old growth and so forth, to those that require more open habitats or disclimax types like fire-maintained oak woodland. And so we strive to understand and recognize all those different types of habitat. And lastly, protection of the very fundamental resources, things like the soil and the water and watershed scale values. So that right there is a very brief intro to the OSU Research Forest System, and I'm going to hand it off to Professor Fitzgerald. Fitz, here we go.
Thank you. Well, I need your help for this. As Mark said, my name is Steve Fitzgerald. People call me Fitz, and worked here on the Research Forest. And the theme for this part of the Starker lecture is managing forests for multiple values in a changing world. And of course, managing forests, we typically look at the term forestry. So I need your help here. When you hear the word forestry, what comes to mind first? Just shout it out.
Trees.
Trees. Anything else?
Soil.
Soil. That's right.
Whatever.
Isn't that dirt? No.
That's on your shoes.
Yeah, that's right. My soils professor cleared that up on day one. Anything else that comes to mind?
People.
People.
Birds. Birds.
Birds. Okay, great. So now forestry, continuing on this, is an integrated science. It's a land use, but it's also an integrated science. So what are the sciences that kind of comprise this term forestry? What? Soil. Hey, that's unfair. We got it packed with a bunch of heads over here. What else?
Silviculture.
Hydrology. Yeah.
Fire.
Silviculture.
Genetics.
Fire. Genetics.
Social science.
Social science.
Wildlife.
Wildlife.
Biochemistry.
Botany.
Look, Mark.
Botany. That's a pretty good list. There is more, economics, engineering, things like that. Any of those people in this audience, engineers? All right, there we go. So of these, and what do you think is the most important?
Silviculture.
Would you please leave? No, it's just kidding. What do you think is probably the most important on that list that I wrote? Bingo. Social science. Why is that? Sorry, soil folks. Why is that?
We're just temporary.
Social science.
So license to operate, none of it works.
Politics. Politics.
Communication.
Yeah, it is people, it is societies and cultures that kind of look to or determine how forestry is applied and practiced based on social values. Social values. And we all have our own personal values and these values that are important to them. And that's what drives how forestry is practiced on the landscape. And every landowner probably has a different suite of values. And so that way you see a different signature on the landscape across Oregon. That is their signature. And so if you look at these landowner and maybe public or societal and cultural values, they could, this is very simple, but they may have a gradient from very simple values to more complex. They could be maybe a singular value, it could be wildlife, or it could be many. It could be maybe more utilitarian types of values versus more holistic. And of course, this is a white guy thinking of these on a gradient. Other cultures may not look at it this way. And so I'll let Andrew talk a little bit about that. It may not be this, it may be some other type of way of looking at how values are applied in the management across natural resources. And so I wanted to kick this off because values are really how people, that's the lens that they look through when they judge how forests are managed. People come out on the research forest. We have a range of forest practices that are designed to try to elicit that response. Oh, that's a clear cut. Oh, what did they do there? They left a bunch of trees in the middle. They're just going to blow down. But oh, okay. That's okay. So the idea of the way the research forest is set up is to provide a range of management options that reflect different values of how forests are managed by different landowners and societies and cultures. And so that's my 5 minutes worth. I'm gonna pass it on. So any quick questions about that? Okay, thank you.
We have one mic, so it will be a baton passing practice here all afternoon. So, all right. So I'm going to start off with a question for the whole panel. What are some of the key scientific discoveries yielded by the forests throughout their history? Any takers?
All right. So if I forget something, so I'll start. We recently, the research funded a fire history study. And Meg back here was the PI and Charles Drake was the grad student. And it was to look at fire history primarily within the Soap Creek drainage. And what we found is that fire was very prevalent. And it spans several hundred years. And then it stopped. stopped around 1847. And that's about the time that Calpullian people, either decimated by disease or put on or moved to reservations and no longer firing the landscape. And so I have a fire scar in my old office that Mark now has, and I think I look at those fire scars and go, that was lit by a human. What was their objective? Did they have fire lines? No. Did they did they check the fuel moisture? Did they have to worry about smoke management? No. So, you know, and maybe Andrew can tell us a little bit more about how they think and what that was. But those we see in a lot of our forest reserves. And so our older forests were a lot more open than what you think of when you think of old growth. They weren't dense like you see further west in the wetter Coast Range. They were kept open by periodic burning and actually much more frequent than we ever thought. So that's one important one, and that manuscript is in process to be published. So that's one.
Sure. Yeah. One of the ones that I would add would be the utility pole co-op research, and which was started late 1920s, early 1930s, I think it is. And if you think on the magnitude of what the just from a infrastructure across the U.S. and outside the U.S. of how much of that is relied on utility poles to transmit lines or hold lines up and transmit technology. A lot of that research was started here on the forest, and that's pretty impressive.
This one's for John Bailey here in the audience. A big part of how the tribe manages their forests is oriented on forest health, and the cornerstone of forest health is tree health, in my opinion. And a scientific finding that leads to healthy trees and happy trees is density management, silviculture. So here you go, John. And we won't get into detail, but you all know that provide tree space to breathe and drink and collect sunlight, and they're happy trees. And if you grow trees in too dense of condition, then they're susceptible to disease, insect, windrow, and a gamut of other disturbances. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about forest health and what it means to the tribe. But a cornerstone and kind of the beginning of that is proper density management.
John put a ringer on the panel as well. For said as well.
See, I would say that some of the other research that we have going on is in Oak Creek. And Catalina Segura leads that work. And Oak Creek, you know, Oak Creek is just an average creek, my opinion. And when you look at creeks, I've seen a lot prettier. I've seen, however, it is an incredibly rich scientific background for work on movement of sediment. Just in the last few years, there's been 7 or 8 papers published on work just out of Oak Creek, and so the next time you walk up Oak Creek, just think about sometimes you can't see the research going on, but there is, and it's just amazing. The other thing, we've had some recreation research. Do you want to?
Sure. So we do a wide range of social science research, and one that might be kind of most applicable for this evening or this afternoon is a recent research that just looked at visitor perceptions of different forest management practices. And just based on people's knowledge sets, their values, really does it does inform how they feel when they see a disturbance. And so we use that information to help tailor our signage and our messaging to help people better understand why we're doing what we're doing and to really tap into those values. So that's research that happened recently that's been directly applied just in recent years.
See, another one that we have is it was led by Mike Newton and Liz Cole. It's kind of what we call it now the mature forest study. And John Bailey kind of leads it. He's the PI on it now. And these were stands at the time that were about 50 years old on the McDonald forest and also on the more productive Blodgett forest. And they were thinned, I think, at 4 different densities and some with small gaps. And understories were planted with alder, grand fir, Doug fir, all that kind of understory, just to look to see what it takes to kind of create a more mature forest. But the interesting thing about all that, and many papers were published on it, but more recently, Matt Powers and a grad student looked at those thinning studies. So the studies were thinned in the 90s, and we've had some droughts since then. And if you look at the increments, the diameter increments on those trees, is you find that, they were thinned in the early 90s. They kind of grew, and as Andrew mentioned, you thin trees, and now the remaining trees have more moisture available to them. And so they can photosynthesize a lot longer into the season and actually increase their diameter growth, but they also increase their crown. And as they do that, over time, they consume more and more water, and then they begin to compete again. Well, in looking at a drought in the late 90s, early 2000s, is that the stands that were thinned the heaviest or most of the trees removed, they weathered that drought pretty well. The plots that had the highest density showed a decline, as you might expect. And then the stand continued to grow, the trees continued to get bigger, expand their crowns, and we had another drought in that 15 and 16. Remember that? And almost all the trees on there showed a decline from that drought. Now the spacings, the wider spacing showed less of a decline. But what that means is that with droughts or whether with climate change, is that, it's a lot of our stands, they're not a one and done treatment, is that like anything, is that silviculture, even use of fire, it needs to be kind of periodic. And that is because stands will get dense, need to be thinned, or, when we think about climate change, you can provide this a resistance strategy of thinning to kind of help them weather through the current climate and the changing climate in the next 10 years. Beyond that, we don't know. It depends on how fast or how far climate change manifests itself. But anyway, those plots are going to be thinned again sometime soon, or next year or two, I think. Is that right? So anyway, so it'll kind of help recalibrate the remaining trees, and then we'll be able to follow those and follow them through maybe even things like, the heat dome effects, and just see how well they can weather. And a lot of that depends on when was the last thinning done, how wide was the thinning done, things like that, just what Andrew was talking about.
All right, that's an amazing array of research just referenced there, but in a way, it's also only just scratching the surface. There's been generations of researchers working from silviculture to wildlife ecology. I just want to briefly throw out Dr. Matt Betts, Dr. Jim Rivers studying birds and pollinators respectively, and then Dr. Joan Hagar and Laurel Sherman back here in their pioneering work on purple martins. And we have one of the strongest regional populations of purple martin because we're retaining large diameter snags that have existing woodpecker holes. And so the conjunction of open space for aerial insectivory and then the availability of those snags showed us that we have this composite structure that provides for their life cycle needs. So really great work on a wide variety of topics. All right, so this one kind of goes to Fitz and Brent here. Can you describe some of the changes in management you've seen in the last 20 years on the research and demonstration for us?
Well, the first thing I would think about, because it affects the public, is for a long while after our 2005 plan, and then the plan was shelved, a lot of the harvest that occurred on the McDonald Dunn was mostly on the Dunn. And so a lot of the recreating public, they spend most of their time on the McDonald. And then later on, and when I came on, we kind of started to do more activity, harvest activity on the McDonald. And people would ask, and rightfully so, it's like, you've increased harvesting on the McDonald Dunn Forest. And I said, we haven't increased harvesting overall. We've increased it on the MAC side, but not overall. And so, but people notice. And so for us, because most of the people do recreate on the McDonald, being able to message and manage recreation around harvests really becomes quite a chore. Brent?
Yeah, I think for changes that I've seen is I think for the research forest, we've been a lot more open about providing information to the visiting public on the what, when, where, why, and how. Are from a spatial landscape scale, our harvests have gotten smaller. Where under the 05 plan we were three harvests out on the Dunn Forest, and that was it for the entire year. And as we shift and move more onto the what we call the central zone and the south zone of the McDonald, harvest units have gotten smaller. Retention of a lot more green trees, wildlife trees throughout the unit. A focus on retaining unique species that we don't have a lot of left. So Oregon white oak, madrone. Focus on retaining cherry as a wildlife food source as well. Incorporating retention and aesthetics around recreation trails when they're in and amongst harvest units. And yeah, it feels like it's been this long iteration over the last 20 plus years, but for sure in the last 13, 14 years since Fitz for sure came on. And I think they're all good things. There's nothing wrong with them by any means. So
I guess I can add on the recreation side. I'm just curious, all of you here or folks listening in, if you've noticed a change, not even on the research forest, but anywhere you go onto a trailhead, if you're like, wow, there's a lot more cars here, or the trails are a lot busier than it used to be. And I think also the demand for recreation has changed a lot and has continued to increase. And so a lot of land management agencies and organizations are grappling with how to deal with public demand for outdoor spaces. It's a great benefit for so many reasons we all know, and it also presents challenges. So I think that's something I've observed even in the brief time that I've been here, is the demand for public access.
Excellent. Thanks to all of you. And Jenny, you beat me to the punch. I was going to ask you about key challenges and opportunities for recreation. So maybe could you just expound on that a little more? Some of your observations throughout your time here managing recreation.
Yeah, I guess maybe I did that intentionally to give you a seamless segue. Well, sort of how Fitz kicked it off, there's a lot of different values people bring in values and how we manage forests, and also what each one of you, wants to achieve or get out of going outside, going into the forest. It might be solitude. It might actually be a social experience or skill progression, or even just, I want to go on this trail and I don't want to see anyone at all. I want to have my dog be able to go off leash. So I would say just in recreation management in a vacuum, it can be challenging to try to meet all of the different desired experiences and types of access people want. And so we do strive to maximize those experiences where we can, but there's always trade-offs. And then I would say unique to the research forest system, we're doing a lot out on these forests. That's an actively managed forest. There's all of these research projects going on. There's class visits. There's a lot going on. And so I think a challenge is how to keep those things in balance, because everything has an impact. And so how do you try to minimize those impacts where you can be a challenge. And kind of the same side, or the side of the same, other side of the same coin, is there's immense opportunity in that too, because one of our main goals of the research forest is to use it as a place for people to learn about forest management, about all sorts of disciplines in a kind of outdoor immersive laboratory or classroom. And so having public access and embracing that free access is a way for us to achieve that goal in ways that many other forests might not be able to without that year-round access. So, and it's also, it's just a gem of the community. These forests are really what make so much of, in this case, I'm thinking McDonald Forest and Dunn and Corvallis, but it means a lot to be able to provide that benefit. And we really embrace that in how we manage for it.
Indeed, it's part of the fabric of this community, and a lot of us are up there on the weekends recreating ourselves. So thank you, Jen. I appreciate that. Andrew, this one's for you. On the land owned and managed by the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, what's the management approach or philosophy, and are there some similarities to what we're doing here on the McDonald, Dunn, and other OSU forests?
Yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to read the college's new management plan. However, today I had an opportunity to visit some Starker projects, as well as some new college forestry projects, and with that experience, and I've also recreated on the forest and lived close enough to the community to understand the work that's done here. And I was pleasantly surprised, not pleasantly, I wasn't surprised, but I noticed similarities between the way that the tribe manages their forests and how the college is managing. And I also noticed that there's not just a focus specifically on conifer forest, but we've got to visit an oak restoration site that I think there'll be opportunities to collaborate with and help with some burning. So there are definitely similarities. Brent touched on smaller harvest unit size, residuals, focus on riparian protection, preservation, and those are kind of some of the values that the tribe bases their management on. We have a long-term approach. Our forests are modeled for sustainability for multiple generations, and the focus is forest health. I kind of touched on it with silviculture and my silviculture comment earlier. However, it's not just the trees, it's the entire forest and the health of the entire forest. It starts with the trees down to the shrubs and minor species, and all the way down to the ground level. The values for the tribe kind of tie back into that idea of a healthy forest and the resources that are available from that forest. I think of it and talk about it like a grocery store. And I think of there's an image in my head of a tribal calendar, and basically it outlines the different resources that are gathered throughout the year. this time of year, spring. So we'll be looking at harvesting, for example, hazel for basketry and camas bulbs later. Spring is salmon season, so spring and fall are salmon season. So the forest health aspect ties in from the canopy down to the ground level to the water. The soil was mentioned. So yeah, a holistic approach, and definitely see lots of similarities between the way that the college is managing their forest compared to how we manage the reservation forest.
I think Andrew answered my question because I was going to ask you, looking at this gradient that I had up there, how do indigenous cultures view their values? I had it on this, but I think you kind of touched on it.
Yeah, I did touch a little bit on it. However, there's multiple values. Our community has varying views, and there's a social aspect to our forest management as well. And I think that goes without saying for all forest management. Somebody mentioned buy-in and having the community's support. And I think in previous generations there was a little more contention. However, through the communication and trust building, people have begun to understand the work that we're doing. It's tough because there are so many. It's complex. Realistically, forestry is complex, and communicating the different complexities and having people that don't study it for a living understand it is difficult. So yeah, we deal with the same issues socially. However, through active management and reiterating and focusing on forest health, and that being our number one focus, we've built trust and have our buy-in of the community. So that's really great, and it looks like the college does a really good job at that as well. Obviously we deal with our hurdles here and there, and recreation increases and trespass and other issues, but overall we've done a pretty good job.
All right, we'll go with one more question from me, and I want to hear what questions you folks have brought here to the panel. So just each of you attempt to be brief, but we celebrate 100 years of the McDonald Dunn and the tremendous legacy there. What does the next century hold?
Fire.
Well, it's climate change. And I think it's going to pose challenges to us. If you look at the McDonald Dunn, I think because it is not in the Coast Range, it is on the dry end of the Douglas fir, I think we will see a reversion back to oak woodland or shrub, some or other novel ecosystem. So that might happen over another century, maybe shorter than that, but we're already seeing glimpses of that now.
Even though we've got prepped with these questions, I wasn't prepared for this one. I don't know. So I'm thinking, I guess from a recreation or kind of more people side of things, maybe my optimistic hope is that we can start thinking of access to the outdoors in a much more inclusive way. And I think a lot of us, or just to have time to go outside or to drive to the trailhead, is really only for a certain subset of the population. And so I think I would hope that as we go into the next century, we can think about creative ways to make the outdoors more accessible for all.
For me, I think as a teaching, research, and demonstration forest, this next 100 years should be leading to new discoveries. We don't know what those are yet, but my hope is that in the next century that our last 100 years of management of the forest will set up the next century of researchers and students and faculty to be able to continue that long legacy.
I'll answer for the tribes forest. I think my vision for the next 100 years for the reservation forest is sustainable ecosystems, whether they are Douglas fir dominated or other species, and to continue to focus on healthy forest ecosystems and availability of native plants and animals for admiration and harvesting.
And I guess I'll briefly answer. I look at the richness of silvicultural approach and the richness of research inquiry out there. And it's all one big working hypothesis. And there are a few landscapes out there that are managed with the amount of structural richness and diversity of conditions as created by management. And that includes prescribed and cultural fire, as on the McDonald, Dunn, and some of our other forests. So it's really going to be neat to see what novel discoveries come to light because of that. And we can contrast it with other landscapes here in the region and worldwide. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And of course, we won't live to see all those discoveries, but certainly we'll have set the table for richness of inquiry and discovery in the future. All right. Well, I think at this time, what we could do, maybe just use a lot of volume and get your question to me. I'll try to paraphrase it briefly, and then we'll let the panel have that. Sound good? So, questions?
I'm curious, what excites you about the 12 and in that it's the newest forest that was maybe mentioned at the beginning, the 3,100 acre forest north of Portland, and it's a plantation forest now. What excites you about the opportunity, sort of that unpainted canvas that as researchers that could take place there that would be harder on a place like McDonald, Dunn, or even the Lodge?
So Dr. DeLuca's question had to do with the Tualatin Mountain Forest, our most recently acquired forest, conveyed to the university last year as kind of an unpainted canvas of forest conditions upon which we can impose novel management and create certain types of habitat and so forth using different silvicultural approaches. So yeah, what say you, the panel?
I think for me, the part that excites me, also makes me the most nervous, is it is right in the backyard of Portland, and the demands for recreation as well are just going to increase, just like we're seeing down here in Corvallis. The part that excites me is that it is kind of a blank canvas, and the idea that you can have, or that I or we can have a hand in trying to transform this out of more plantation forestry into more mature ecosystem type services. That's really intriguing for me. It's also, it's not easy to do, and it's going to take decades and decades to do that. But those challenging projects are also what drives me personally to keep coming back. And those are the fun projects that when they turn out and they work really well, like you nailed it. And when you have a hiccup, then you learn from it and you keep moving on.
It's been almost 20 years since I heard this, but a professor of mine once said, if you build it, they will come. And he was referring to the Field of Dreams movie. And that excites me. We talked a little bit about species diversity on the habitat diversity on the Starker's forest today, where we visited a new clearing and had larger timber in the background and multiple bird species thriving. And Mark kind of went into detail about the different species and the habitats that they preferred, and that excites me, building it and kind of on what Brent said, just elevating the habitat, and if you build it, they will come.
The thing that rained in my head. It's 20 years ago. 10, 15 at least.
And I'll briefly answer. There are some sites that did not historically have oak woodland, but with climate change, they're dry south-facing or southwest-facing slopes with shallow rocky soils. So instituting novel oak woodland on those as an adaptation to a changing climate, that excites me, you know. Again, a working hypothesis. All right, other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I'm wondering on the tribes' lands, to what extent have traditional practices been restored? I mean, traditional cultural burning, but in addition, tarweed and camas cultivation, deer hunting and such.
So the question had to do with on tribal lands, to what extent have traditional lifeways and cultural practices been reinstituted from cultural fire to traditional plants like tarweed, camas, and deer hunting and so forth. So, all right.
So thanks for the question. It's a continual focus of ours at the Natural Resources Department. We are responsible for managing low to mid elevation conifer dominated habitats, as well as fringe habitat and prairie habitat. And so there's a bunch of different projects that we that focus on bringing back and providing opportunities for our people to practice culture. I'll just touch on a few examples. We manage about 100 acres of elk meadow habitat. It's relatively unnatural, the sizes, but it mimics clay dense upland forest meadows. And those are used for, we also burn them and seed native plants in those, but the primary focus for those is elk and deer habitat and hunting opportunities. We do a lot of thinning and underburning. There's a restoration property just, let me think of this, north and east of Grand Ronde, called Noble Oaks, and we've done a pretty significant thinning and understory burning there and have worked with our native plant nursery to establish and maintain native plants for gathering. So that's another example. We've also done a conifer removal on that site. There was I can't remember the exact size of the piece, but it was a plantation. We removed the plantation, and we're on our second entry burn, and we're restoring it to prairie habitat. So those are several examples. We do small patch burning as well. Work with our cultural department and our community to develop and provide opportunities for learning and for managing small patches for multiple species, camas, yampa, berries, hazel. I can keep going, onion. So we do a lot of that type of burning and collaboration. And it's been relatively difficult to implement a cultural fire and any fire for that matter. There's a bunch of sideboards with it. There's smoke, there's politics, there's risk. We're up against a lot of financial risk in communities and homes and structures and people. So we do our best to plan and implement burning, both for site preparation, but also to bring the community together. And that's kind of the cultural aspect of fire, is bringing community together. And we all kind of, I guess I speak for myself. I'll say we all enjoy fire, sitting around a campfire. It's also kind of the cornerstone of every tribal story. It's like wind, water, fire, and it's part of life. And I like to use it as a tool to bring each other together. And we talked a little bit today about cultural burning and what that means. And fire is culture. Fire is built into our culture. It's part of our being. So bringing people together to enjoy that in a safe setting is what we try to do. So hope that answered your question. I babbled a little bit. I'll add, there's also opportunities for cultures different cultures to collaborate and intertwine themselves, and we're working with the College of Forestry to try and implement some prescribed burning on the college forest and on one of their camas prairies, hopefully this summer, late summer, early fall. So hopefully we can pull that people together and bring communities together and enjoy that.
And every prescribed fire I've ever burned on has built community, and we're hoping to continue that trend with the Grand Ronde and the Celeste and other folks in the indigenous community. All right, other questions? Yeah.
But we're at 100 years, and I would imagine that or whoever was managing the forest 75 years ago, it might have been a little easier. And when we're trying to, as a forest community, work with the city and all the people that come and visit, brings more challenges because you're focusing on multiple uses. So I'm kind of curious, what do the managers, when they go home at night, is there anything that ever keeps you awake?
So Ron notes the increasing complexity of managing these lands, with complexity increasing over the last century. And what keeps us awake at night when we go home from our jobs?
Briefing.
Really, you're gonna limit me to retired? Okay. So a couple of things. When I came on board, we were really trying to do some more retention in silviculture. And we implemented a variable retention harvest up on Vineyard Mountain. Now, normally I don't like to do retention harvests on ridges because of wind and shallow soils. It also depends on how the stand's been managed. But we did one up on Vineyard Mountain. It was a variable retention. It had been a stand that's about 80 years old, and it had been thinned. It had been buffeted by wind for a long time. There was even a little bit of salvage in there. It had probably gotten as much wind as anything. And I looked at that and I go, man, structurally, the stand, this would be a great variable retention. There was a trail through it. We were going to design how we're going to leave trees along the trail. And we did the harvest. The harvest came off great. The harvester didn't damage any trees. People really liked how it came out. It opened up some views, but yet you still had trees. And I can tell you that every damn storm that came by, I was up there, whether it was a weekend or not, because I was so worried that it would come down and then we would have a clear cut. I would not choose to. We have other stands that have not been thinned, and there is really no option to do variable retention harvest because they will end up on the ground. So when we talk about the complexity of silviculture, it does depend on management and the management that stand has received earlier on in its life. But anyway, we had the storm in December here this past year. I didn't run up there after that, but there were a few trees down. Yeah. So anyway, I'm feeling a little better by it, but you never know when a big blow is going to come and take it. So that one has kept me up.
Great question. I wanted to get my piece in too. Is I have not been on another forest that has so much asked of it on what is in reality a fairly small forest. So 11,500 acres with 6,000 of that being the McDonald, and the ask of, from the public, from the college, from, ourselves internally to provide for all these different management, all these different uses and values. And so what wakes me up or keeps me up is weighing all these different trade-offs in my head at night or driving to work in the morning. That's what will pop through my head. And as I weigh those different uses and different values to see, how they kind of pencil out. And yeah, for me, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's only 6 to 7 of us. It's like 6.5. So I mean, where are we at now? 7? Are you the 0.5? Yeah.
Probably.
But we're a small team, so I just want to echo Brent's. I think it can often, you just feel like you're never quite doing enough. And there's so much opportunity baked into all of our programs that we help manage. And there is a lot of support and resources, but it can be really challenging. And I call myself often in this job a recovering people pleaser, because it's just really hard to be and do everything for everyone all at once. And so there's just trade-offs even on the day-to-day working. And I imagine all of you and your work feel that too. So yeah, keeps me up.
What wakes me up in a good way at the middle of the night is when Holly was leading the forest management plan, we had canvassed the community about the forest, and a lot of people didn't know what we did. They go, well, it's a research forest. I don't see any research. and there's a lot going on that you don't see, right? And that got me thinking, is that we're not telling our story. We're not telling all those good things that's happening right under their noses. And so what wakes me up is like, oh, I got this idea. We should be doing this. And we all have these same ideas. And it's like, well, we got our day job, but then there's this interpretation and trying to get that out to the public. And we have, with Kevin Lee's shop and with the support from the dean and Holly, we've improved that a lot. But there are so many more stories that we could tell and interpret on the forest that would be fantastic. But that keeps me up, because wakes me up. Yeah. So. Anybody else? Sleep good at night.
I sleep good. That was a good lesson.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, you guys kind of just like touched on this about like these gaps, between like public understanding and management understanding of how the forests are used and or should be used. Like you kind of talk about like how do you go about like bridging those gaps, and like what does it feel like to bridge those gaps like on a personal level?
That's a great question. So the question had to do with the gaps between public understanding of who we are and what we do, and their expectations and so forth. How do we bridge those? And I'll briefly answer with engagement, with contact. We started a series of hikes with a forester. We've got Jenna's excellent newsletter that she puts together. We use the website, and we use our community. We use our community to tell our stories. And sometimes those are hard conversations to have when we come up against the tension space of different expectations levied upon the research forest. But that's how we learn. We live in that discomfort, and we learn in that discomfort, and then we strive to do better and to be better. So back to the panel.
I like your term discomfort, because there's a lot of that. And that discomfort, though, turns us thinking about, is there a better way? Is there a better way I can tell this? Maybe can I anticipate things better for the public? But one of the things that the forest is set up to do through the plan is that we're managing the forest to answer questions that people have about managed forest. Okay, this is a managed forest. So what effect does clear cutting have on X, Y, and Z, or, the variable retention harvest? So what we have set up is, 10% of landscape is short rotation forestry for the most part. 23% is long rotation. 23% is uneven age or multi-age, which is, there's still a lot of unknowns on that. 10% is in late successional reserves. Another 10% or 12% is in what we call ecosystems of concern. So that's riparian, that's prairie and oak woodlands. And so, and then we have about 17% that's just in teaching, research, and non-forest areas. And so the idea here is to be able to answer questions on trade-offs between that range of forest and natural and forest management, so that someday we can maybe answer that question. Adding wood to standing snags and even fly trees that became snags, we can enhance early cereal bird habitat. Purple martins. I mean, things like that we turn around and implement right away. So we can have this research that is put right back and demonstrated right on the forest. And it goes beyond just research class. Now it's operational size. And so that's, as we begin to implement this new plan, you'll see this signature across the landscape of those different management regimes, and we'll be able to better tell the story of what those trade-offs will be. And so that's my take.
I'll be really brief. I have learned too that a lot of people use the forest just to get exercise and to unplug. And so we are also trying to think of ways to make those connections in where we kind of meet people where they're at. And so even if it's just a little sign that they might see as they go by, or a student worker that's helping out in the forest, all of those little bite-sized moments do help with that connection or that desire to help people learn, because not everyone's coming out to take a deep dive into forest management. So we have to we have to kind of get creative a lot. That's it. Anyone else?
I think that encapsulated it very well. Everyone, please join me in thanking our wonderful panel. Thank you, Fitz, Jenna, Brent, Andrew, and thanks to everyone. I wish to conclude on an optimistic note. We're on a voyage of discovery here at the College of Forestry and the research forest. And we hope that voyage trends towards that elusive, better relationship between society and land. And that's the ultimate purpose to which we dedicate ourselves. Join us in that purpose. Join us in that journey. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next year for the Starker lectures as they continue. Thank you all.